Hi. So, welcome to this way too long, way too detailed review? Book club meeting thing for MXTX's debut novel, The Scum Villain Self-Saving System. Oh, okay. Full disclosure, I wrote this long-winded love letter to the book as an introduction to whatever this is, and it was like 2 whole pages of rambling, and I'm going to be rambling literally this entire thing, so it felt a little unnecessary. Also, it was way too personal, and we're all here basically on a first date. So instead, I will try to be succinct and professional and give you my cover letter. This is what people do on a first date. So, hello. I'm qualified to moderate this discussion on Scum Villain Self-Saving System because for the last 4-ish years, my brain has been full of worms, and all the worms do is talk about Scum Villain. Thank you for coming. All right, the Scum Villain Self-Saving System, or SVSSS as it's commonly abbreviated, is the debut novel by Mojang Tongxiu, or MXTX. Side note, I am not Chinese, I only speak one language, which is American English, so I apologize that my pronunciation is not going to be 100%, but I'm going to try my best. Another side note, I'm going to be spitting out a lot of terminology associated with Chinese danmei and xianxie fantasy settings, so I'll do my best to explain, but I will also link some resources if you want to study up.
This system will aid user 3.0 by providing additional context where needed.
So, MXTX is a very popular danmei author, danmei being Chinese media focused on the romantic relationships between 2 men. 2 of her books are incredibly popular. The Untamed, the live-action adaptation of MXTX, was one of the highest-grossing dramas of 2019, and I'm pretty sure every single brand and company in China has done some sort of collaboration with TGCF. And not just Chinese brands. Like, I can go into Barnes & Noble and get official merch for TGCF right now. And then there's Scum Villain. Poor, forgotten, unloved Scum Villain. The show got one 10-episode season, and that was 4 years ago. There was an official manhwa, but it got canceled after, I kid you not, 2 chapters. Did I mention it's my favorite? Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. It's not all hopeless. The book was officially licensed for an English translation by 7 Seas Entertainment, along with MXTX's other 2 novels. So now you can read that instead of the shitty AI translations on Wattpad, like I did. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to my little book club. Let's talk about Volume 1. Before I get into it, this book is rated NC-17. There are mature themes, sexual themes, graphic depictions of violence, and a whole lot more. I will include a full list of content warnings in the description and show notes. Please read them and keep yourself safe. Okay, so I know I keep saying I'm going to talk about the plot of Scum Villain and then not talking about the plot of Scum Villain, but it's super important that I talk about a different book first. Proud Immortal Demon Way by Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky. Proud Immortal Demon Way, or PIDW, was a male power fantasy of a stallion novel. To be more specific, PIDW was a monster-fighting, escapist cultivation novel, with an incomparably ridiculous length, a golden finger that broke every rule, and a harem size nearing 3 digits, seeing as every female character fell for the protagonist. The story follows protagonist Luo Binghe. He has a classic tragic backstory, abandoned at birth, put in a wash basin to float down the Luo River. He's fished out and grows up poor with his single mother, the washerwoman. He's bullied by the young masters of the house she works for, but he's happy with his mother, until she gets sick and dies. At 12, he climbs his way up a mountain to Kangchong Mountain Sect in order to turn his life around, become an immortal cultivator, and make his mother proud. He gets in, but it's more of the same bullying and abuse. This time from his martial siblings, and the most from his teacher, the Scum Villain of PIDW, his Shizun, Shen Qingchen. Nevertheless, Binghe studies hard and does his best until he qualifies to compete in the Immortal Alliance Conference. But then everything goes wrong. Demons attack, and it's revealed that Luo Binghe is actually half-demon, a half-heavenly demon, the most powerful and feared race of demon. They are also thought to be extinct. When Scum Villain Shen Qingqiu discovers his heritage, he pushes Binghe into the Endless Abyss, a place worse than hell. There, Binghe's personality darkens until he becomes the iconic pitch-black heart, vicious protagonist of PIDW. After 5 years, he escapes with his golden finger, Deus Ex Machina sword, Shinmo, translated Heart Demon. The sword has a lot of powers, including being able to tear reality, letting Binghe create portals to almost anywhere. The sword's cursed spirit is only satisfied with blood, sex, and violence, so Binghe begins conquering the world. He takes over the demon world, then the cultivation world, all while building his harem. Then he gets his ultimate revenge on his scum villain Shizun Shenqingqiao by removing his arms and legs. This is referred to turning him into a human stick, removing his tongue, his eye, and leaving him to rot in prison inside a pickle pot until he dies. After that, PIDW really loses all plot. Binghe travels around collecting wives in increasingly ridiculous plots. All women with any kind of potential lose all brain cells when confronted with Binghe's heavenly sky pillar, and inevitably become another forgotten member of his ever-growing harem. All the story threads are dropped in favor of mindless and ridiculous smut. Massive plot holes are written over by just making Binghe the strongest, smartest, bestest person in the universe. And then he uses his magic, logic-defying sword to merge the 3 realms, the heavens, the demon world, and the mortal world, together. So, who is reading this dumpster fire web novel? That's where we meet our main POV character and PIDW's greatest hater, Shen Yuan. So, who is Shen Yuan? The fandom usually puts him somewhere between 19 and 25 years old, the Scum villain fandom, I mean. He's a self-proclaimed second-generation rich kid. He spends all day in his room reading web novels, and he's read all of PIDW. He got drawn in by the cool fantasy plants and monsters and was genuinely rooting for Lil Binghe's success, and just put up with all the smut. And when I say he's PIDW's biggest hater, I mean it. He leaves scathing comments on each and every chapter that gets published. This dude canonically pays for early access to every chapter just to read it, be inevitably disappointed, and then shit all over the author. I really want to show you Shen Yuan's perspective, and thus the perspective that SVSSS is told through, the flavor of it. So here's an excerpt from page 12. Proud immortal demon way, by airplane shooting towards the sky. Just looking at that euphemistic handle smacks you in the face with a dirty feeling. Grade school level writing with landmines everywhere, breaking all suspension of disbelief. And Shen Yuan couldn't bear to call that incoherent mess of a world the author had built a cultivation setting. What kind of cultivation world has people using horses and carriages all day? What kind of cultivation world had people who, after achieving anedia, still needed to eat and sleep? What kind of cultivation world had an author who occasionally mixed up even the stages of foundation establishment and nascent soul? When faced with a protagonist, every single character acted like his total edgelord aura had devoured their intelligence, especially Lil Binghe's master Shenqingqiao, that idiot among idiots, scum among scum. His only purpose was to dig his own grave, and he hadn't even managed to finish before he was killed by the protagonist instead. End quote. I actually love Shen Yuan as a character. He's just like this nerdy loser guy who spends all day bullying this author while also paying his rent by buying VIP access and all the merch and stuff. It's amazing. He's so mean, but in a very modern way, which is really emphasized when he's surrounded by a bunch of fantasy people who regularly punch each other. Sorry, spoilers, I guess. But I feel like most of you know where this is going. Also, Shen Yuan's internet handle was Peerless Cucumber, and that kind of speaks for itself. Okay, so the story starts, the story of Scum Villain that is, with Shen Yuan dying. It's kind of implied that he dies from sheer rage. In the donghua, he chokes on a steam bun. In a lot of fan works, he eats like expired yogurt or something. Anyway, so he dies. And his last words are, "Dumb fuck author, dumb fuck novel." Then, in classic isekai fashion, he wakes up again. He hears a mechanical voice, and he compares it to Google Translate, and it calls itself the system. It tells him that its main operation is under the concept of you can, you up, no can, no BB. The system is very fun. It adds game mechanics into Shen Yuan's transmigration experience and is the main driver to the plot of SVSSS. It's a sassy little robot that threatens and punishes Shen Yuan the whole book. It says it's activated by Shen Yuan's dying words, dumb fuck author, dumb fuck novel. And the operating concept, you can, you up, no can, no BV, is a deliberately bad translation of a Chinese meme that means basically like, oh, you think you can do better? If you can't do better, then shut the fuck up. So Shen Yuan wakes up with a sassy Google Translate screen that only he can see and hear. And he's in a traditional style room, wearing traditional style sleeping robes, and he's got traditionally long hair. And there's this guy sitting at his bedside with his own super fancy traditional robes. The man sees him waking up and calls out to him. Shudi? Shudi, can you hear me?
师弟 is a term of address referring to a younger martial brother. Also related, 师兄 refers to an older martial brother. 师姐 and 师妹 refer to older and younger martial sister respectively.
Shen Yuan hears this guy, this, quote, handsome, elegant young man, as he describes him, calling him Shudi like he's in a cultivation novel, and the system telling him to, quote, fulfill his desires and turn this stupid work into a magnificent, high-quality, first-rate classic, and starts putting some pieces together, but not before going on a little tangent. This happens a lot, so be prepared. He talks about how he's read so many cultivation novels, and they've all prepared him for this moment, basically. How he wouldn't be cringy and give himself away by being in denial, asking like, are you filming a movie? Or being like, wow, these props are so realistic. Nah, he's taking this seriously. He asks a bunch of subtle, probing questions and comes to the conclusion, which is confirmed by the system, that he's in PIDW, and he's talking to sect leader Yue Qingyuan. And he is now in possession of the body of the Scum villain himself, Shen Qingqiu. Okay, before we keep going with the plot, I want to talk about the setting a little bit. So in this world, the world of PIDW, there are 4 major cultivation sects. Zhaohua Monastery, full of monks. Tianyi Temple, full of priests and nuns. Huanhua Palace, full of rich, elitist assholes. And Kangxiang Mountain, full of our main characters. The 4 sects have their territories, and they help protect the mortals in their territories, separate from any kingdoms or empires in the mortal world. It doesn't really come up much, but the cultivators mostly stay out of the mortals. But the cultivators mainly stay out of mortal non-cultivator politics. Kangxiang Mountain sect has a more benevolent reputation than the other sects, because instead of getting in by recommendation, connections, or paying a fee, they select all their disciples through a sort of open enrollment. Binghe gets in even as a street rat. They had him and all the other applicants dig holes in the ground to test their spiritual potential, and he was chosen. Kangxiang is also the largest sect. There are 12 peaks, each with their own lords and their own specialty, and their own cultivation style. The peaks are ranked by seniority, and the peak lord's status is denoted by a shared generational name. The current generation's name is Qing. I've heard a lot of people getting into Scum villains say it's hard to remember character names because the Qing makes them all sound very similar. And yeah, it does, sorry. The first peak is Qiangding, led by Peak Lord Yue Qingyuan, who is also the head of Kangxiang as a whole. They specialize in leadership and diplomacy. Their peak uniforms are black. The second ranked peak is Qingjing, led by Peak Lord Chen Qingqiu, our Scum villain himself. They are the peak of scholars, artists, and strategy. Their peak uniforms are green. After the first 2, MXTX doesn't actually specify the rankings. She also doesn't name all 12 peaks or their lords, but I'll go through the ones that are named, and this is in the order that they are listed in the Seven Seas glossary. We have Anding Peak, led by Peak Lord Shang Qinghua. They specialize in logistics, transportation, and repairs. They're also often looked down on by the other peaks, despite being maybe one of the most important peaks keeping everything running, but that's a rant for another day. Next is Baijian Peak, led by Peak Lord Lu Qingge. They are the warriors and main defense for the sect. Next, Qiankao Peak, led by Peak Lord Mu Qingfang. This is the peak of healers and medicine. Next, Xianshu Peak and Peak Lord Qi Qingqi. This one doesn't really have a speciality. It's more just no boys allowed. And the peak itself has a magic barrier electric fence that activates if men try to intrude. Their uniforms are purple. Next is Wangjian Peak, led by Peak Lord Wei Qingwei. This peak contains the forge that makes all the spiritual swords for the entire sect. And the last named peak does not have a named peak lord, and that's Kuxing Peak for aesthetics. MXTX also briefly mentions a peak that specializes in brewing wine, but it's not named. Fans commonly fill the gaps of the last 4 unknown peaks, assigning them specialties in like beast taming, alchemy, weaving, spiritual rays. The world is really our oyster here. Anyway, back to the plot. Shen Yuan asks a few more questions before giving into his curiosity and asking Yue Qingyuan directly about Luo Binghe. Yue Qingyuan hesitates just long enough to give Shen Yuan some hope before being like, "Oh, Shitty, don't you remember? You beat him up and locked him in the woodshed right before you passed out. Maybe you should consider being a little nicer to the boy. I don't know. Only if you want to." And Shen Yuan's like, "Oh, of course, I locked him in the woodshed," before realizing, oh fuck, I locked him in the woodshed. And the protagonist is going to retaliate by locking me in a pickle jar until I die, and then immediately passes out again.
OOC.
Oh, did I mention Yue Qingyuan and Shen Qingqiu have this weird relationship in PIDW? All the Peak Lords kind of hate the Scum villain except the sect leader, who is always weirdly indulgent. But the Scum villain appears to hate the sect leader even more than the rest of the Peak Lords, so it's a little bit fishy. In PIDW, Yue Qingyuan, the strongest cultivator, dies because he goes back for Shen Qingqiu after the rest of the sect abandons him to the Demon Emperor Luo Binghe. He walks into an obvious trap and dies by being pierced by 10,000 arrows, after Luo Binghe taunts him by sending him Shen Qingqiu's severed legs. I don't want to reveal too much. We'll get there when Shen Yuan does. Right now, Yue Qingyuan's just a bit of a weirdo big brother type that's a little okay with him being mean to children. Shen Qingqiu wakes up again, and he's alone this time. Side note, I'm going to start referring to Shen Yuan Transmigrator Millennial Boy Extraordinaire as Shen Qingqiu going forward, mostly because all the other characters are going to call him that, and it's going to be less confusing this way. Also, Shen Yuan starts referring to himself as Shen Qingqiu at this point, which has a lot of implications and will absolutely send me spiraling down a pit of character analysis if I think about it too hard, so I'm just going to leave it here. I love being so normal about this book. Okay, so Shen Qingqiu wakes up again. He takes some time to freak out, explore his new house, freak out some more. He, finds a mirror and is like, "Oh, I'm so handsome," and starts ranting at the mirror like, "If you're so handsome and rich and have cool magic powers, why do you have to be so mean to kids?" He paces around some more and thinks about getting Luo Binghe out of the woodshed.
OOC.
Let's talk about the system. The system introduces a couple of mechanics right off the bat. There are B points, which are the system's main currency.
B points, also known as points for being a badass. The more B points one accrues, the more magnificent, high quality, and first-rate the work has become.
How can I raise my B points?
1. Change the nonsensical plot, and raise the average IQ of the villains and supporting characters. 2. Avoid landmines that break suspension of disbelief. 3. Ensure the main character's satisfaction points. 4. Discover and finish plot events.
It gives him a starting balance of 100 B points and threatens that if the balance ever hits 0, it'll initiate punishment protocol. Very ominous, definitely not foreshadowing. And the other thing is OOC. Basically, if Shen Qingqiu's behavior doesn't align with the original, if he acts out of character, then the system will deduct points. He can unlock the OOC function, but only after completing a beginner-level mission. So Shen Qingqiu can't go and rescue the little protagonist because it's OOC, so he does the next best thing and outsources. He calls for Ming Fan. He knows him to be Qingjing's head disciple and Luo Binghe's head bully. He did all the Scum villain's dirty work, locking Binghe out of the dorms, giving him a fake manual, dumping him with chores, beating him up on the regular. In PIDW, Demon Lord Binghe gets revenge on Ming Fan by tossing him into a pit of insects. RIP. Ming Fan brings Binghe to the bamboo house, Shen Qingqiu's house, and this is the first time we get to see our little protagonist. Poor sweet boy. He's 14 and scrawny and looks like a mess. Shen Qingqiu skirts OOC, tossing some medicine onto the ground and saying some BS about not wanting Qingjing to look like it abuses its disciples. He asks some probing questions and confirms, yes, Binghe has been here and suffering for about 2 years now. He dismisses them pretty quickly after that. So, at this point, Shen Qingqiu has met 3 people, and all 3 of them are like, what the fuck is going on with this guy? Well, Yue Qingyuan's more concerned with his health, but Binghe and Ming Fan are super confused. Why is their master suddenly being kind to Luo Binghe? Heck, the original only ever referred to him as beast or mongrel, and never by his name. After the kids leave, Shen Qingqiu decides to go on a little walk. Qingjing Peak is surrounded by a bamboo forest, and Shen Qingqiu, fanboy that he is, wants to see it. He decides as soon as he unlocks OOC, he's going to, quote, cling fiercely to the male lead's thighs, to hopefully raise enough goodwill that Binghe won't eventually torture and kill him. He also tests his magic powers. I'm gonna read another excerpt. Sorry, I'm not trying to read the whole book to you guys, word for word, but it's just so good. Okay. Shen Qingqiu tests out Shuya, Shen Qingqiu's spiritual sword. Wanting to see Shuya's power, Shen Qingqiu casually slashes once. Who knew a single slash could be so terrifying? The sword's arc dazzled in a flash of lightning released from his palm, so bright that even UV 400 sunglasses wouldn't have saved him if he hadn't closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he beheld a deep ditch that had been carved into the ground, as if it had been split by lightning. Holy shit! Shen Qingqiu remains expressionless, but his heart surged with exhilaration. So damn awesome. Power worthy of a character who is a peak soul master. With this level of cultivation, if he diligently trained for the next 20 years, then maybe in the future, as a last resort, if he absolutely had to face that overpowered Luo Binghe, he might just be able to flee in disgrace. Yes, all he wanted was to be able to flee in disgrace. This man is so funny, I love him. Shen Qingqiu hears someone coming, so he hides in the forest. It's Binghe and, new side character alert, Ning Yingying. Ning Yingying is Luo Binghe's ditzy childhood friend. When he begins harem building, she becomes his first wife. In PIDW, she served a very damsel in distress role, getting kidnapped like every other week and causing problems with Ming Fan, who was a big crush on her, and Shen Qingqiu, who weirdly favored her. That favor led to Shen Qingqiu also being hit with a lot of pervert accusations, which is crazy because the original treated her like a daughter.
Now is not the time.
Oh, also Ning Yingying calls Luo Binghe Aluo, which is a cutesy nickname that the original Scum villain seems to hate. The two teens immediately clock Shen Qingqiu's sword buffoonery because he's the only one on the peak with enough power to do it, but they move on pretty quickly. Binghe has chores to do, chopping wood, and Ning Yingying is there to just keep him company. Shen Qingqiu decides to keep spying because he's just a curious guy. What can he say? Dude's such a fanboy, I swear. He's so excited to see his favorite character hang out with his first love. It's so cute. But the couple is soon interrupted by Ming Fan and a few of his lackeys, and oh no, Shen Qingqiu immediately recognizes this scene. Ming Fan tries to give Ning Yingying a jade pendant, but she rejects it like, I like Aluo's much better, even though he won't let me look at it. Oh, Yingying, you sweet summer child. He keeps it hidden because the pendant is the last thing his mother gave him before she died. It's also fake because it's all she could afford, but it's Binghe's most prized possession. And now, embarrassed bully Ming Fan knows where it is. He has his lackeys hold him down and takes it. There's a lot of taunting and struggle, and Binghe punches Ming Fan in the face, and then Ming Fan throws the pendant in retaliation. Shen Qingqiu, still hiding in the bushes, sees the pendant land on a branch and finally decides to step in. Anonymously, of course. He drives the bullies away with a few chi-infused leaves.
OOC.
And loses a good amount of points. But at least the kids are okay. Well, mostly. Binghe and Ning Yingying spend the rest of the afternoon looking for the pendant, but they never find it. And Shen Qingqiu just watches them the whole time. It gets dark, they leave, and he grabs it from the branch. The system awards him for finding a key item, and he puts it in storage where he pretty much forgets about it. And that's chapter 1. Okay, I know that kind of took a while, but there was a lot of exposition, and I think the others will go a bit faster. Please bear with me. Chapter 2. Shen Qingqiu gets his beginner level mission. Hooray! Yue Qingyuan comes by asking if he's feeling better, and still wants to take his juniors down the mountain for training. Shen Qingqiu privately calls him a quest-giving NPC for a sect leader. The next day, Shen Qingqiu has Ming Fan gather up all his kids, his junior disciples. Our boy gets settled onto a carriage, and his disciples get horses. But suddenly there aren't enough horses. You know, Tangshan Mountain is just the largest, most powerful sect. Yeah, they must run out of horses all the time. And surprise, surprise, it's Luo Binghe who has to walk. Real smooth, Ming Fan. Only Shen Qingqiu's not having it. Ning Yingying offers to let Binghe ride with her, but Shen Qingqiu invites him to ride in the carriage with him instead. He gets around OOC, arguing that he's only doing it to keep Yingying, his most precious disciple, happy. See? Perfectly in character. But in the carriage, he accidentally smiles at Binghe and loses points anyway. System, you petty bitch.
Your feedback has been registered.
The mission is in Shuanghu City. They were asked to come by the richest man in town, Master Chen. Something has been killing and skinning his concubines. This old-ass man gives his sob story with his last and definitely teenage concubine, Dare, sitting on his lap. Gross. Shen Qingqiu nopes out of there as quick as possible, and the disciples split off to investigate. Well, most of them. Ning Yingying asks him to go to the market with her. He has to decline because of OOC, and Shen Qingqiu chills in the rooms they were provided. Well, more accurately, quote, Shen Qingqiu didn't even want to pretend to meditate, so he just laid on the bed, just pretending to be dead. Eventually, Ming Fang comes back to report on their investigations. The murderer is confirmed to be a demon. Shen Qingqiu praises Ming Fan a bit. Quote, to tell the truth, Shen Qingqiu was extremely satisfied with Ming Fan as a disciple. Even though he was a rich young master and spoiled rotten, he was never even a little arrogant in front of his teacher. Instead, he was absolutely obedient and incredibly respectful. A man could never dislike being worshipped like a god. Ming Fan had also single-handedly handled the travel preparations, from arrangements of food to lodging. If his IQ hadn't inevitably plummeted whenever he laid eyes on the protagonist, transforming him into a schoolyard bully capable of any misdeed, he would also be a promising young sprout. Me too, Shen Qingqiu. It's really all Airplane's fault. I'm a Ming Fan apologist. The Donghua did him so dirty, if you know, you know. If you're not there with me yet, I get it, but I promise he'll get there. Ming Fan starts telling him the strategy he thought to handle the threat when Binghe comes bursting into the room in a panic. Ning Yingying was kidnapped when they were exploring the market. It begins. Hang in there, Yingying. Shen Qingqiu sends Ming Fan to gather the rest of the disciples and keep everyone else together. He takes Liu Binghe to show him where Ning Yingying was last seen. He leads him to the busiest part of the city market. Shen Qingqiu gets a little stuck. The system eventually offers him an out in the form of easy mode for 100 B points. Shen Qingqiu doesn't hesitate, and the next moment there was a very obvious trail of demonic energy for him to follow. It leads him to the creepiest, rundown, most obvious demon hideout. Shen Qingqiu turns to tell baby Bing Bing, who has been following him the whole time, to return to Ming Fan and the rest of them, when a foul wind blows the gate open and the whole world goes dark. Shizun, wake up quickly! Shen Qingqiu woke up. Upon opening his eyes, he saw Liu Binghe opposite him, looking awfully distressed, arms and torso bound. As Shen Qingqiu roused himself, Liu Binghe heaved a sigh of relief, eyes brightening. Shizun! Ning Yingying echoed. She was tied up with Liu Binghe, her expression miserable. Shen Qingqiu was a little dizzy, and he had no idea if whatever crap the demon had sprayed on them had any side effects. He was in a foul mood. This easy mode was straightforward to the point of mercilessness. It had delivered him straight to the boss's mouth. The worst part was that the dignified Peak Lord of Qingjing Peak had been unexpectedly struck down by a mini-boss, and thus, shortly after he woke up, the system shrilly declared,
OOC. B points minus 50.
He'd just spent 100 B points to activate easy mode, and now, in a flash, he lost another 50. How could he not be distressed? The original Shen Qingqiu's skill at facing down demons should have made this quest easy as killing a chicken with a knife. Shamefully, the knife had failed to even hit the chicken. In seconds, Shen Qingqiu discovered something that made his mood even worse. His body felt a little strange. He was chilly, and he had a slight ache all over. Upon lowering his head, he almost couldn't stop a fuck from leaving his mouth. He'd been stripped naked. Only his upper half had been stripped naked, but that was already horrifying enough. Regardless of everything else, Shen Qingqiu was still a Peak Lord. This appearance, with his upper half stark naked and his lower half only wearing a pair of pants and white shoes, and his forelimbs bound tightly with thin rope as he laid sprawled on the floor, what was this? He looked exactly like a tender pretty boy caught in bed during an illicit act. No wonder the system had deducted 50 points straight off the bat. It was deserved. Even taking him to 0 would have served him right. Ah, the Skinner demon scene. Now, this is a moment that Shen Qingqiu is purging from his mind as we speak. Never speaking of it again would be too soon. But for Binghe, For Binghe, this is a very pivotal moment in his life. I will not elaborate further. Anyways, the demon eventually shows up and immediately starts monologuing. Oh, the great Kanchan Mountain sect brought to his knees, etc., etc. You'll never guess who I am, wahahaha. And Shenqingqiu is like deadpan, you're the heir.
System reminder, the heir, or butterfly, is Old Man Shin's last remaining concubine.
The demon shrouded her face but didn't mask her figure at all. She also smelled exactly like the incense at Chen Manor. So, mystery solved, woohoo! Except they're all still tied up and she's still monologuing. She explains that she was wearing the skins of the women she killed, and then when they started to rot, she'd kill another and switch skins. And now she has them. She's going to wear a cultivator skin that was going to stay fresh and pretty way longer. And don't count on your Shizun saving you. He's bound with immortal binding cables. Spiritual energy can no longer flow anywhere in his body. He can't hope to protect himself. How could he save you? After Shenqingqiu gets over the ridiculousness of this villain just giving out her entire plan for free, he's like, well, am I about to die right now? He asks the system if he will reset if he dies here.
Only the protagonist is granted the privilege of plot armor.
Hold on, there's an idea. Shenqingqiu silently apologizes to the protagonist and then baits the demon to attack Luo Binghe. He also implies that he thinks Binghe is immeasurably beautiful and talented, but that's beside the point. Sure enough, when she tries to hit him, the universe steps in and the ceiling beam crushes her before she can hit him. She's down, but not out. When she gets back up, she's like super angry, and she goes to attack Shenqingqiu this time. But little did she know, when the beam fell, it also loosened the protagonist's bindings. She's like, you fool! No matter how much you struggle, immortal binding cable can only be cut by immortal sword! And Binghe is like, got it, grabs Shuya off the demon and slashes the ropes. Shenqingqiu blasts her so hard it's kind of overkill, but that was rough for him, so he deserves it. Binghe unties Ning Yingying, who fainted, and finds Shenqingqiu's stolen clothes. He redresses, then bullshits his way through an explanation, mainly why it seemed like he was offering Binghe to the demon on a platter. Wading through the bullshit, Shenqingqiu says, even if an accident befalls this master, no misfortune will come to you. Accidentally being profound is so very on brand for Shenqingqiu. But hey, OOC is now unlocked. Plus, he can add immortal binding cables into his system storage. When they get back to the sect, Yue Qingyuan immediately grabs his wrist to assess for injuries. The man always knows, especially when it comes to his... Anyway, all that matters is that everyone's okay. Shenqingqiu asks his permission to cultivate in seclusion in the Lingxi caves. Yue Qingyuan's like, for the Immortal Alliance conference? And Shenqingqiu's like, sure. And just like that, permission granted. Before he goes, though, he's sure to call Binghe to his house and give him a proper manual. He'd only had the fake one that Ming Fan gave him up to this point, and Shenqingqiu wanted to make sure he had something to study while he's gone. The Lingxi caves are huge and labyrinthian, and ooh, look, this chamber's full of deep sword gashes and really old dry blood. Shenqingqiu literally doesn't give a shit. He just plops his ass down in the center of some old murder scene and starts meditation. As good as any place, I guess. He doesn't get very far when he's interrupted by a lot of turbulent qi, telltale signs of someone having a qi deviation in the next room, so he goes to investigate. And he's immediately attacked by a sword that, as a true PIDW fan, he recognizes and is like, oh, fuck. Luckily, even though the man attacking him clearly has a lot of strength and spiritual power, he's also full-blown qi deviating. It doesn't take Shenqingqiu long to subdue him and start feeding the man energy. And that man is Luo Qingge, the Baijian Peak Lord and War God of Kanchan Mountain. And Luo Qingge is beautiful. The prettiest of pretty boys. Shenqingqiu is actually offended by how pretty he is. Male readers always fervently admire strong characters. Even though Luo Qingge never officially debuted on page, he hadn't lacked for fans, and Shen Yuan had been especially fascinated with him. In his headcanon, Luo Qingge had been a sharp and manly man, powerful and magnificent, a war god, right? Shenqingqiu looked down at that face, as beautiful as a fine woman's, and his dreams shattered and died. The fantasies he had always held destroyed. How could the invincible Baijian Peak Lord look like his spiritual antithesis? This was clearly the face of a charming young master who arranged flowers and plucked farewell willow branches. With this appearance, you've totally betrayed the headcanons of your martial prowess fanatics. Then again, it made sense. Lu Qingge was the older brother of the #1 true female lead, the peerless beauty Lu Mingyan. As the protagonist's wife, she absolutely had to be first class from top to bottom. It was just science to give her such powerful genes. Undefeatable in battle, an arrogant disposition, and an attractive face. With Bingge around, a second character with the same mold was unnecessary. No wonder Great Master Airplane offed him so early. So let's talk about Lu Qingge. In PIDW, his first appearance is literally him dying, which makes Shen Qingqiu recognizing his sword even crazier. He goes into seclusion in the Lingxi caves, and then his body is carried out by the Scum villain after he murders him in cold blood. But wait, Shen Qingqiu didn't even know he was in the caves with him. And Lu Qingge came and attacked him while he was already deviating. Shen Qingqiu just saved his life. Makes you think that our Shen Qingqiu had an advantage over the original, who was known to be very prone to chi deviation himself. Oh, but the original goods hated Lu Qingge. They fought constantly, and Shen Qingqiu threatened him many times. So the fact that he died in a cave with just him and Shen Qingqiu present, of course he killed him. In PIDW, killing Lu Qingge was one of Shen Qingqiu's most infamous and provable crimes. He didn't even defend himself against the accusations. Anyway, everyone is alive now, and that's all that matters. Lu Qingge eventually wakes up and he's not super happy, probably in pain, and he wakes up with his head on the lap of his least favorite coworker. And Shen Qingqiu's just like, shitty. And Shen Qingqiu's just like, I've had a change of heart seeing you almost die. Let's be friends now. And Lu Qingge immediately is like, this dude's an imposter or possessed or trying to prank him or something. He gets so annoyed that he almost attacks him again, and Shen Qingqiu's like, ah, I can see you need some more time to come around. I'll leave first, and nopes out of there. He goes back to his murder cave and meditates for real. Meditating really fucks with the sense of time. Shen Qingqiu meditates until he feels himself level up and theorizes it's been several months at least. He leaves, shouting farewell to Lu Qingge, who doesn't respond, and exits the cave to Qiangding Peak literally on fire. Disciples are yelling and running around, the rainbow bridges are broken, and the sect leader is away on business. The demon invasion has begun. The demon invasion on Qiangding Peak was the first major climax in PIDW. It's the first time Binghe got to show off his raw talent in combat, and it also introduced the other two of Lu Binghe's 3 most important wives. The first was Ning Yingying. We've met her, we love her. The second is Sha Hualing, the demonic princess and leader of this invasion. When Binghe begins conquering the demon realm, Sha Hualing fights alongside him as his right-hand woman. Last but not least is Lu Mingyan. She's the Xianshu Peak head disciple, and Lu Qingge's little sister. Her arc with Lu Binghe mostly revolves around her trying to get vengeance on the Scum villain for the death of her brother. She's also Shen Yuan's favorite Binghe wife. He likes her complex motivations, but more he likes that she's the only wife in the novel with 0 sex scenes. Pop off asexual. Hell yeah. Lu Mingyan is known to be the most beautiful member of the harem, but she always wears a veil to hide her face. Airplane never wrote a description of what she looks like under it. Shen Qingqiu sends the first disciple he sees to bang on the walls and shout into the caves until Lu Qingge comes out. Then he gathers everyone else in the main courtyard. Sha Hualing meets him. She wears a skimpy little demon outfit made with just sheer red scarves and bells. And I only mention this because in PIDW, it's very clearly just fan service, but for Shen Qingqiu, this is reality now. Demon fashion is really slutty, and that's life. So remember, every demon that shows up is dressed slutty. I don't make the rules. Sha Hualing follows the PIDW script and proposes they settle things with 3 exhibition spars. The system chimes in and tells Shen Qingqiu that Binghe has to fight in order to impress his future wives. Shen Qingqiu agrees and fights the first match against a one-armed demon named Elder One-Arm. Side note, Shen Qingqiu constantly flames airplane shooting towards the sky for his terrible naming conventions. It's a complaint brought up almost as much as the pointless, mindless smut. Anyways, Shen Qingqiu wipes the floor with him. He mostly uses the fight as an opportunity to show off and test out his leveled up powers. He wins. The next fight is between Xia Hualing and Lu Mingyan. Xia Hualing wins in accordance with canon. And Lu Binghe has to fight the tiebreaker. His opponent, Elder Skyhammer, wields, wouldn't you know it, a giant hammer. But more than that, he's wearing spiked armor coated in poison. The poison is called Without a Cure, and I'll give you 3 guesses why. Well, okay, technically it does have a cure. In PIDW, a beautiful maiden is poisoned without a cure, and Lu Binghe agrees to help her find a treasure flower to cure it. They find it, but it doesn't work. And the girl's like, well, I guess I'm doomed, but if I'm gonna die, there's one last thing I want to do before I go. And they bone right there. And then Master Airplane reveals that there was a cure after all, our esteemed author's favorite cure-all, dual cultivation with a heavenly demon. Binghe's heavenly pillar saves the day, and the formerly poisoned can take her rightful place in the harem. So, Shen Qingqiu chooses Lu Binghe to fight Elder Skyhammer, not only because the system threatens him, but because he knows about Binghe's demon heritage. Even if he is scratched by the armor, it won't infect him. The original Scum villain sent his youngest disciple to die, but our Shen Qingqiu sends him because he knows he can win, and he tells him to. Binghe, in true protagonist fashion, is empowered by his Shizun support, and against all odds, slays the giant. Elder Skyhammer can't take the loss, though. He tries to attack Binghe again, but Shen Qingqiu steps in and blocks him. Shen Qingqiu threw a glance behind him. Are you all right? Gonna shamelessly try and farm some more favor points. This disciple is fine, Lu Binghe said in a rush. Many thanks to Shizun for the assistance. This child is so foolishly sweet. Shen Qingqiu's inner face grew redder, and he quickly turned back to Xia Hualing. Miss Xia, you need to properly discipline your subordinates. If you can't stand losing, why set yourself up for the potential of it with these 3 matches? Xia Hualing also hadn't predicted Elder Skyhammer's attack, and was slightly embarrassed. She was just about to say a couple of perfunctory words appropriate for an apology, when in that instant, something happened that no one could have predicted. Elder Skyhammer, who had been lying motionless on the ground, suddenly leapt up and hurled himself at Lu Binghe a second time. Shen Qingqiu had already taken his hammer. Did he intend to use his body to crush Lu Binghe? But as Shen Qingqiu took in Elder Skyhammer's open arms and his pose that seemed he was about to embrace Lu Binghe, his thoughts suddenly made several lightning-like turns, and his entire body broke out in cold sweat. Fuck me, he's still wearing the poison-spiked armor. In that instant, Shen Qingqiu completely forgot about Lu Binghe's plot armor. In the moment of truth, subconsciously, he once again moved to protect his student. Shuya left its sheath, blade flashed bright as snow, and pierced Elder Skyhammer's hulking body. But the demon had an entire body's worth of brute force and all-out effort within him, and he didn't back down even when skewered. Instead, he seemed overjoyed, relentlessly careening forward, forcing Zhuya to run clean through him and out his back, his face stretched in a sinister grin, and he threw himself at Shen Qingqiu. Shen Qingqiu swiftly made his decision and promptly withdrew his attack, but it was already too late. From his right arm came stabs of pain, and his heart chilled down to its depths. Skyhammer collapsed on the ground, spat out a mouthful of blood, and laughed madly. Ha ha ha, Shen Qingqiu, I've taken you down with me. Ah ha 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 ha. Worth it. It was worth it. Shizun! Lu Binghe grabbed Shen Qingqiu's right hand. You've been pierced! Shen Qingqiu wrenched his hand free. Nothing's wrong. I wasn't pierced. Don't listen to the ravings of a blowhard. As he spoke, he glanced down, and his heart was once again blotted out by a frantic scream of fuck, 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 fuck. No one could hear the raging waves in Shen Qingqiu's heart. Motherfucker, how many times has the male lead screwed you over? You were already told he won't die, remember? He won't die! Why did you go out of your way to rescue him? Fuck! Shen Qingqiu decides his only plan is to bluff and stall for time. He challenges Xia Hualing one last time, thinking, oh shit, this really will kill me. But wait, who's swooping in to save the day? It's my man Lu Qingge! It doesn't take long for the war god to drive the rest of the intruders off the mountain, but it is enough time for Shen Qingqiu to really feel the effects of Without a Cure. At least he gets to have a cool mentor-student, I'm dying, but you made me proud. moment with Binghe before passing out. Also, he calls Lu Qingge a tsundere for yelling at him while also catching him in his arms. And that's chapter 2, aka the one where Shen Qingqiu cannot catch a break. Don't worry, Cucumber Bro, it's only gonna get worse from here. When Shen Qingqiu wakes up, multiple days have passed. Ming Fan is there. He sees his master awake and runs away to tell the others. Lu Binghe is hiding around the corner. Poor kid feels super bad that Shen Qingqiu was injured protecting him. Shen Qingqiu says he doesn't blame him, and Lu Binghe apologizes for misunderstanding him for so long, and pleads to devote himself to his shizun. His shizun is super confused, but just kind of rolls with it. Then Binghe is like, "Oh, shizun, you've been asleep for many days. You surely must be hungry. Shall this disciple bring you something to eat?" Now, Shen Qingqiu the cultivator has been practicing inedia for years and doesn't need to eat at all. But Shen Qingqiu the second-gen rich kid loves good food that he doesn't have to make or even pay for. And Shen Qingqiu the PIDW fanboy would never pass up on an opportunity to try the legendary protagonist's cooking. Binghe learned to cook from his late washerwoman mother, and it was his only hobby outside of blood, sex, and violence. In PIDW, Binghe's cooking was often used as his ultimate, last resort, panty-dropping, ace-in-the-hole technique for wife collecting. Shen Qingqiu wanted to try the food that convinced many a woman to marry the guy they just met. And it doesn't disappoint. Lu Binghe brings back a bowl of congee, rice porridge. It was his signature dish, his mother's favorite. Side note, I've made rice porridge before. Shit takes at least 90 minutes to make, even a single serving. Binghe has the bowl ready. In fact, for the multiple days Shen Qingqiu was unconscious, Binghe made a fresh bowl of congee every 2 to 3 hours so that when Shen Qingqiu woke up, he'd have fresh, hot food. This, of course, is perfectly normal and well-adjusted behavior. Perfectly fine. He vows to cook for him every day, and Shen Qingqiu nearly chokes, but he doesn't say no. Anyways, I love this scene. Poor Shen Qingqiu is suffering quite a bit, but he gets a little break and gets some good food. Also, it's the first time he gives in to his urges and pats Binghe on the head. Lu Binghe's hair is described as thick and wild and soft and fluffy, and a lot of fans interpret it as curly. I love curly hair Binghe. Sadly, he doesn't make it into a lot of official media. The English translation for sure, his hair is definitely curly. The Korean version, it definitely has some wave to it, but most official arts give him straight hair, which, don't get me wrong, Binghe rocks a blowout, but in my heart, he's got bouncy curls. I also love this scene because Shen Qingqiu gets a lot of care and support. After Binghe feeds him, Ming Fan comes back with a bunch of peak lords. Yue Qingyuan, of course. He rushes back to the sect as soon as he heard. Normal doting sect leader stuff. Lu Qingge is also there, my mans. He carried Shen Qingqiu to the healer's peak in his arms. He super thinks Shen Qingqiu is possessed or something. He's not technically wrong, but there's no ghostly qi indicating possession, so he'll just keep an eye on for now. And then there's Mu Qingfang, the healer's peak Qian Cao peak lord. In the Donghua, they give him a little mustache. He's very mild-mannered and kind. He apologizes that he couldn't get rid of the poison, but he has written out a meditation routine as well as prescribed a bunch of medicines to keep the poison under control. Unfortunately, the poison will still act up every once in a while. Shen Qingqiu immediately clocks it as a stupid plot device he knows the system will use against him at the most opportune times. Yeah, man, you nailed that one on the head, sorry. To account for blockages, Mu Qingfang tells him he will need to have regular meridian cleansing sessions with a powerful cultivator. Who, you might ask? Lu Qingge volunteered. Only because he saved his life in the caves. Don't think he likes you or anything, it's just obligation. Shen Qingqiu eventually kicks everyone out to get some rest. There's also a little scene outside of Shen Qingqiu's POV with Ming Fan and Lu Binghe. Ming Fan gets annoyed hearing people praising Lu Binghe all of a sudden, just because of the invasion and his teacher's change of heart, and he tries to bully him by giving him some more chores. Unfortunately, Lu Binghe is still on cloud 9 because Shizun pat my head and liked my food, and is so happy to do chores. Quote, if Shen Qingqiu were there, he would definitely have suspected that, within the depths of his heart, Lu Binghe was actually an extreme masochist. However, Shen Qingqiu was astoundingly oblivious to the fact that, thanks to the divine wingman abilities of his useless teammate Ming Fan, Lu Binghe's favor had again risen to a new height. For the time being, Shen Qingqiu was laying down in elation. End quote. So, that night, Shen Qingqiu goes to sleep in his bamboo house and wakes up in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by fog. Except he's not awake, because this is the dream world. And when Lu Binghe calls out to him, it confirms that this is Lu Binghe's dream world. Shen Qingqiu knows what's going on. He read it in PIDW. After the invasion, Lu Binghe gains some attention from the demon world. The dream demon, Meng Mo, decides to test his mental fortitude by creating this dreamscape, and Lu Binghe's mind unconsciously pulls in the person Lu Binghe feels the safest with. Shen Qingqiu is confused because that person is Ning Yingying. It's supposed to be Ning Yingying. The couple grows to understand each other more during the dream arc, and it ends with them making wholesome vows to stay together forever. And it's a very important moment in the development of the relationship. But Ning Yingying is not here. Shen Qingqiu is. What the fuck? Eventually, the nothingness and fog starts forming shapes of buildings and people, and suddenly the pair are in the village where Lu Binghe grew up. None of the people have faces, which is pretty creepy. When they see people who do have faces, they follow them, which leads them to watching a number of tragic scenes, the fog around them changing to show them. Shen Qingqiu warns him not to touch the illusions. Everything they see is made out of Binghe's mind, so any harm done to them would only harm Binghe. All the scenes are of Binghe's suffering, watching his mother die, being denied by the kitchens to bring her one last meal, being beaten by the masters of the house, then by his peers on Qingjing Peak. His Shizuan pouring tea on his head the first day on the mountain, losing his mother's pendant in the forest. Eventually it all becomes too much, and Binghe is mad. He starts trying to beat the illusions, which only backfires onto himself. Shen Qingqiu tries to stop him, but he's too mad to listen or care about the pain. So Shen Qingqiu does the only thing he can do and throws himself in front of the illusion. Binghe punches him instead, and that's enough to break him out of his rage. Binghe jumps back into guilty White Lotus mode. Shen Qingqiu tries to comfort him. No, I'm not going to punch you back. I jumped in front of you to save you from harm. To hit you now would defeat the point. No, it's not your fault that demons are attacking you. You didn't pull me in on purpose. The way of demons are extremely unpredictable and impossible to guard against. However, if you don't want to run into similar troubles in the future, you must become stronger. These words were spoken purely out of his personal feelings. This was a world of immortals and monsters where the strong ate the weak. Becoming stronger was the only way to guarantee that you wouldn't become cannon fodder to be pushed around by the world. Lu Binghe's thoughts shifted, and without speaking, he suddenly raised his head, fixing his steady gaze on Shen Qingqiu. Shen Qingqiu's heart thumped. Lu Binghe's eyes, dark like obsidian, flashed with light more dazzling than the reflection of the moon and stars. That look in his eyes, that kind of protagonist's look, full of resolute conviction and blazing fighting spirit. Could it be I've already become the protagonist's guiding star and his life path going forward? Lu Binghe fell into a proper kneeling position by Shen Qingqiu's side. I understand, he said in a strong, clear voice. Wait, what did you understand this time? Can you not only say half of your words every time? Tell me the rest! Shen Qingqiu didn't notice that, as Lu Binghe spoke this sentence, he didn't use this disciple to address himself. Lu Binghe tightly clenched his fist. This kind of thing, he said, enunciating each word. I definitely won't let it happen a second time. Letting Shizuan protect his weak self, letting Shizuan be injured because of him. This kind of thing absolutely could not happen again. Shen Qingqiu let out an "oh." What's going on? He suddenly had this protagonist is protecting me, I feel so safe kind of feeling. What exactly was going on? Safe, your ass. This person will carve you into a human stick in the future. Wake up. Shen Qingqiu was filled with a plethora of complex emotions. Fuck. Originally, this conviction to become stronger to protect my important person should have been inspired by the protagonist seeing the female lead's frail, lovely, and delicately panting form after she sustained an injury while helping him. Was the system laying all the emotional labor associated with the female lead's role on Shen Qingqiu? I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I love Shen Qingqiu. I love that he really takes his role as an unreliable narrator seriously. So many people around him, Binghe especially, are having all these profound moments, and he's like, I don't know what's happening right now. But him picking up on wife plots? That's a big moment for him. Good work, buddy. Shen Qingqiu tells Binghe that he'll always be there to protect him and pats him on the head some more. Then Mengmo finally shows himself. He's impressed with Binghe, but wants to talk to him alone. With a wave of the hand, Shen Qingqiu collapses, sending him to a dream within a dream. He's honestly like, finally, I've finished playing my friendship role. It's time for me to clock out. It's what happened to Ning Yingying. Mengmo needs to talk to Binghe alone because he's about to reveal the protagonist's demonic heritage for the first time. He reveals that there's some kind of seal keeping Binghe's heritage hidden, but that it will break eventually. He offers to teach Binghe how to control his demonic powers as well as to pass on what he knows about manipulating dreams. In PIDW, Mengmo becomes Lil Binghe's first real teacher. But right now, Lil Binghe has just had a lot of revelations and has sworn a lot of loyalty to Shen Qingqiu. He's super conflicted. He wants to become stronger in order to protect his Shizun like he promised, but if Shen Qingqiu hates demons, he was just poisoned by demons after all. How could Lil Binghe consort with a demon? Be a demon, if that's the case. Mengmo sees that he's not going to get an answer right away, so he leaves him to give him some time to decide. Meanwhile, Shen Qingqiu is taking back everything about being happy to leave Lil Binghe and Mengmo to chat. Ning Yingying, when this was her part, was sent to a happy, mindless dream where she prances in flower fields or some shit. Shen Qingqiu is sent to his worst nightmare, wrapped in chains, hanging in a dungeon, no limbs to be seen. Eventually, someone comes in. He doesn't see his face, just his pitch-black, expensive robes, but there's only one person it could be. One person whose fate it is to torture the Scum villain. When Shen Qingqiu wakes up in the real world, he doesn't throw up, but it's a near thing. Then Binghe comes rushing in. Shen Qingqiu really doesn't want to see Lil Binghe after being reminded of his body's canonical bad end. He even slaps away his hand when Binghe tries to help him up. Poor Bing Bing. But Shizun is unharmed, which is the important part. Eventually, Binghe works up his nerve and asks, Shizun, demons, are they all wicked beyond redemption? Must every last one of them be exterminated? Shen Qingqiu didn't reply to this question right away. He stood in place, indeed finding it difficult to answer. Seeing Lil Binghe petrified, forcibly keeping calm while also somewhat anticipating his teacher's answer, Shen Qingqiu spoke slowly. Humans can be good or bad, so naturally demons too can be good or evil. We often see demons victimizing people, but that doesn't mean there aren't cases where humans harm innocent demons. Don't put too much weight on race. This was the first time Lil Binghe had heard a teacher express this kind of opinion. He listened in a daze, heart thumping wildly. Shizun means, even if someone is closely connected to demons, that it doesn't mean the demons find the heavens and them intolerable? Is that right? How can you claim they are intolerable to the heavens in the first place? Shen Qingqiu countered. If they're intolerable, why would the heavens let them exist? Who has the authority to say whether they ought to be tolerated or not? During this chain of questions, Lil Binghe's eyes gradually lit up. There was within him a faint sense of burning passion. Lil Binghe, you may choose to ignore the words this master tells you from here on out. Shen Qingqiu says at last, but you must always remember what I've told you here today. In this world, there is nothing intolerable to the heavens. This is true for all races, as it is true for humans. Oh, fantasy racism. Hearing these words, Binghe gains a lot of hope and makes up his mind. He'll let Mengmo teach him, but he won't call him teacher, that's reserved for somebody else. But he will become a tolerable demon, like Shen Qingqiu said. Shen Qingqiu doesn't notice because he's arguing with the system. The system said that Binghe entering the Endless Abyss was an unskippable event. Well, not totally unskippable, but Shen Qingqiu doesn't have anywhere near the 10,000 points the system would deduct if he didn't. Eventually, Shen Qingqiu dismisses Binghe. It's super late after all. Binghe goes to leave, but not in the direction of the dorms. And Shen Qingqiu remembers, oh shit, he's still sleeping in the woodshed? Binghe says he's going to the kitchens to get started on Shen Qingqiu's breakfast. It's super late, and Shen Qingqiu wants to ask him, but Binghe might lie to save face. So Shen Qingqiu acts on impulse and tells him that tomorrow he is to bring his belongings and move into the side room of the bamboo house. if Luo Binghe lived a little closer, then in the future, it would be easier to have him make breakfast and clean up around the house. Shen Qingqiu's adaptability was, as always, as incredible as a record-breaking dick. Just a moment ago, he had been unable to even look Luo Binghe in the face. Now he dared to scheme how to make the great protagonist wait on him hand and foot, serve his tea, carry his water, wash his clothes, fold his blankets, etc. Being in the middle of fantasizing, he hadn't noticed the protagonist's reaction. Suddenly, Luo Binghe pounced on him like a tiger, capturing him in a tight embrace. Next, we get a bit of a time skip. There's a fluffy montage. Binghe and Shen Qingqiu living together. Binghe in his housewife era, cooking and cleaning and humming a little tune. Binghe also levels up a lot. He trains with Shen Qingqiu during the day and with Mengmo at night. Binghe and Mingfan have more of a rivalry now. Who gets to serve Shizun tea? Mingfan got the paperwork today, but Binghe makes all his meals. Who can be more useful to Shizun? Chapter 4 starts on a scene very close to the start of the Immortal Alliance Conference. Binghe is now 17. In PIDW, he's 17 when a Scum teacher pushes him into hell. This scene has a lot of iconic dialogue. Binghe is freshly back from a solo mission off the mountain. Shen Qingqiu has been sending him on more missions so he could raise his reputation before the conference and give him more real-world experience. He was at a higher level than his PIDW counterpart, now that the abuse had stopped and he had a teacher who didn't hate him. But back to the scene. Shen Qingqiu thinks Mingfan is trying to bring him tea and starts to dismiss him, but Binghe sneaks up on him all smooth like, "This disciple rushed a considerable distance all the way from the outer provinces, and Shizun won't even give me a single glance before refusing me?" They talk about the conference a little, and then Binghe's like, "Why does Shizun keep looking at me?" he asked. Could it be that this disciple was gone for so long that Shizun also missed him? "Am I not allowed to look at someone I raised?" asked Shen Qingqiu. Luo Binghe chortled. "Of course Shizun is allowed. Am I pleasing to look at?" Shen Qingqiu shook his head while smiling. He considered his next words. "Binghe." "Yes?" Luo Binghe's expression instantly turned serious. He had realized that Shen Qingqiu had something important to say. The conference is right around the corner, and Shen Qingqiu doesn't have anywhere near the 10,000 points to spare. He decides to ask Binghe if he wants to become stronger than everyone, but he would have to suffer. Would he be willing to suffer pain, torment, and countless tribulation if it meant he'd become the strongest? And Binghe responds, "Binghe does not fear suffering and tribulation. I only wish to be strong enough to protect the people and things important to me." Shen Qingqiu is hardcore coping. He has to seriously mentally prepare to push Binghe into the abyss. On one hand, he's got this Binghe that he's lived with for a few years now. He's kind and confident and a pure Lotus-type character. On the other hand, Shen Qingqiu's favorite protagonist, the one he kept reading the worst web novel ever to cheer for, only appears after his growth in the abyss, was only motivated by the need for revenge on his teacher. That Luo Binghe was the coolest, surrounded by countless wives in a palace that he owned. Shen Qingqiu decided he would get him there because that's what Binghe wants, right? Shen Qingqiu rides Sijuedi Gorge for the Immortal Alliance Conference in a carriage with Qi Qingqi, the Xianshu Peak Lord. Pretty much everyone else in the Kangsheng procession are riding horses. They banter a bit. He's like, I'm sick. And she's like, more like spoiled. And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. As Luo Binghe feeds him tea and candy through the window. Qi Qingqi was one of the most vocal Peak Lords against the original. She thought he was a pervert. There were a lot of rumors of Shen Qingqiu spending his nights at brothels, and she wanted to keep him as far away from her girls on Xianshu as possible. But she, like Lu Qingge, had been getting along with Shen Qingqiu a lot more in the past few years. At Juedi Gorge, the Peak Lords, and leaders from the other sects, gathered on a large stone dais. All the disciples competing were a lot lower down, preparing to enter the valley. Inside the valley, inside the barrier, about 5,000 demonic beasts had been released. Whenever slain, the beasts would drop a prayer bead. The bead's color signified the difficulty rating of the beast. The disciples would then string all the beads they collected onto a spiritual wire they'd been provided, and that's how the points would be counted for the competition. Higher difficulty prey gave more points. Up on the dais, Shen Qingqiu eavesdrops on conversations around him, a lot of them praising Binghe's looks. The favor to win, however, seemed to be on Gongyi Zhao, the head disciple of Huanhua Palace. The teen is a similar age to Luo Binghe, and they look similarly handsome. Funky coincidence. Huanhua Palace eventually became Luo Binghe's back in the cultivation world of PIDW. It's the sect his birth mother is from. The sect leader, always just referred to as the Old Palace Master, becomes a sort of grandfatherly character to Luo Binghe right out of the abyss. And Binghe marries his granddaughter, his heir, to become the next sect leader. Okay, but back to the story. People start betting. Shen Qingqiu, who read the book in its entirety, knows that Luo Binghe destroys the competition and is the undoubted winner, so he casually makes a super outrageous bet. 5,000 spirit stones on Luo Binghe. Lu Qingge's immediately like, I doubt you even have 1,000 spirit stones in your peak. But Yue Qingyuan swoops in like, don't worry, I'll pay if he loses. Shitty can keep all the winnings though. Oh, Yue Qingyuan, you simp. In the valley, the disciples will be monitored by a bunch of spirit eagles who will project what they see onto crystal mirrors up on the dais. Woohoo! Xianxia TVs. The first day of the competition goes pretty quickly. The disciples get their bearings within the barrier, and a lot of them start teaming up. Binghe, however, gets a pretty slow start. Slow enough that people are shooting Yue Qingyuan a lot of really pitying looks. Early on, Binghe gets pegged by the competition as being really strong, and really hot, and really polite. This results in a lot of girls, especially girls who were not interested in competing seriously, following him around. This also happens in PIDW, so Shen Qingqiu wasn't that worried. A lot of them eventually marry into the harem. 2 of the girls hanging closest to Binghe were a pair of sisters from Huanhua. One of them was the one to eventually, introduce Binghe to the world of Pa. The Heavenly Pillar's first conquest. I think it happens at the conference, which, gross. All the sect leaders are just watching, I guess. After she becomes a wife, though, she also becomes a big instigator for the harem drama. I guess she has a lot of hold over the other wives. But that doesn't happen in this timeline. Shen Qingqiu is a little confused why Binghe seems so annoyed with the presence of so many future wives, but he chooses to ignore it for the time being. The Old Palace Master seems to notice Luo Binghe for the first time, really notices his face, and he has a weird reaction, even standing up. Whatever, he'll ignore that too. He's too nervous to pay attention to anything else. It's right around midnight. Binghe and his entourage are resting near the river. A lot of the girls are playing in the water. They're all on script. Well, mostly on script. Binghe looks like he's trying to think of a good excuse to leave, and he's not joining them. The girls are playing in the river, splashing their feet. Shen Qingqiu curses Airplane a little bit for the Pete. And then the monsters appear. In PIDW, he was close enough to intervene, but this Binghe was a good distance away from the water. The monster, the new Yuanchan, swallows 2 of the girls whole. One of them was one of the sisters. How could one of Binghe's wives die? That's what Shen Qingqiu's asking, but he doesn't have enough time to contemplate. The observation deck is in chaos. The new Yuanchan is way higher level than anything that was supposed to be in the gorge. Also, disciple emergency flares are being launched all over the valley, and spirit eagles are being shot down by the dozens. The conference was being attacked, and they were losing communication. The Old Palace Master shouts to open the barriers and let all the disciples escape, but Yue Qingyuan and the rest of the Peak Lords are like, you can't, because it'll endanger all the surrounding mortal villages. Their only option is to enter the gorge and defeat the monsters themselves. Shen Qingqiu is one of the first to jump up and enter. He has a role to play after all. Yue Qingyuan and Lu Qingge both try to stop him, citing his poison, but Shen Qingqiu is going in no matter what. He beelines his sword towards where Binghe's group was last seen. He finds them away from the river, but surrounded by a new threat, the ghost head spiders. Basically a ripoff of facehuggers from Alien. He gives a quick lecture on their weaknesses, Shen Qingqiu, you monster nerd, and Shen Qingqiu and Luo Binghe work together to lead the group out of danger. Luckily, they come across a patch of flowers. In fact, they're the same treasure flowers that Binghe was looking for during the Without a Cure wife plot. The flower's aura is enough to drive away the spiders and most other demonic beasts. Unluckily, just before they reach the flowers, Without a Cure acts up, and Shen Qingqiu is forced to fight without spiritual energy. Binghe notices immediately. They reach the flowers and decide to leave the girls in the safe zone to wait for rescue. and Shen Qingqiu and Luo Binghe will venture out to look for anyone else. Well, really, Shen Qingqiu knows the Endless Abyss will open soon, and he wants to be as far away from anyone else as possible. They set off, but not before Binghe takes one of the flowers. He thinks it might cure Shen Qingqiu. It won't, but thanks for trying. Student and teacher walk away from safety and into the forest. And pause. Okay, I need y'all to stop and think for a second. How are we feeling about the story so far? How about this exact point in the story? Do we feel satisfied right now? Like, say, hypothetically, we're watching a show. If the show ended right here, at this exact moment, them walking into the tree line together, would you be happy with that ending? Would you be content, say, waiting, 4 years? If that was the last scene the show released? Well, I tricked you. It's not a hypothetical. That is, I kid you not, where season 1 of the Donghua ends. Just right in the middle of the conference invasion, literally right before a major season finale level event. And it's been 4 years. Theoretically, there's a season 2. The Donghua team said it was done, and they even released a trailer, which, okay, side note, the Scum Villain Self-Saving System season 2 trailer dropped right around the same time as the last season of the MDZS Donghua, as well as the trailer for season 2 of the TGCF Donghua. Lots of Donghua news all around. But that also meant, all at the same time, MDZS fans were talking about Wang Xian reaching their happy ending, getting married and stuff. And TGCF fans were getting excited about the fluff in season 2. That trailer was a lot of them staring at each other with heart eyes. Oh, Sanlang, yes, Gaga, you know. And the Scum Villain Self-Saving System season 2 trailer. If you haven't seen it, you should. Literally, the entire thing is Luo Binghe beating up Shen Qingqiu. It's so silly, honestly. Oh, here's Wang Xian riding Little Apple into the sunset. And here's Luo Binghe throwing Shen Qingqiu through a wall. Here's Hualian holding hands in the gambler's den. And here's Luo Binghe kicking Shen Qingqiu in the dick. You seriously couldn't make this up. It was honestly really on brand for Bingqiu, so at least there's that. But I have pretty much lost hope on ever getting season 2. China changed a bunch of their media laws, and the SVSSS Donghua didn't have the backing to survive the war. Anyway, I'm so happy for TGCF mains. Season 2 was great. I still can't believe that's where it fucking ended. I swear. Anyway, gotta keep going. Okay, so I left out a key thing, or rather, key person, because I had some things to say about the Donghua. But somebody finds Binghe and Shen Qingqiu while they're picking flowers. And that's Anding Peak Lord Shang Qinghua. The man literally scurries out of the tree line and is very happy to see Shen Qingqiu. Shen Qingqiu, on the other hand, starts insulting him in his head, calling him undignified and a coward. But it's not just because of his lackluster entrance. In PIDW, Shang Qinghua betrays Kangshan Mountain Sect by working for the Ice Demon that eventually becomes Luo Binghe's right-hand man. He spied for the demon realm throughout his discipleship and began to sabotage after ascending to Peak Lord. He was the one who let Sha Hualing into the sect, and he's the one who released the demonic beasts now attacking the Immortal Alliance Conference. Shen Qingqiu blames him for everything bad that's happening right now. He just wasn't expecting him to be so pathetic. Oh well, there's a lot more to focus on right now. In PIDW, Luo Binghe squares up against a Black Moon Rhinoceros Python. The battle pushed Binghe far enough that the seal containing his demonic heritage finally shatters, and Binghe is exposed to the original Scum villain, who then pushes him into the Endless Abyss. So Shen Qingqiu is keeping his eye out. The three of them are walking through the woods when the ground begins shaking, and Shen Qingqiu immediately knows the Endless Abyss has opened, and he's looking for the monster, but instead, a man steps out of the shadow, a demon, an ice demon, the exact one that Shang Qinghua works for, Mo Beijun. Why would Luo Binghe's future subordinate, his magnificent right hand, and best buddy for committing evil deeds, murder, and mayhem show up right here and now? Mo Beijun was a pure-blooded demon, a supremely orthodox demonic second gen. In the future, he would inherit his family's territory on the demonic border in the north, and after that, he would spend all his time appearing and disappearing at will, idling his life away, completely indifferent to everyone else. However, this maverick was destined to get beaten up by a Luo Binghe who had suddenly activated his overpowered abilities. Thereafter, he would mysteriously capitulate to the protagonist. to the point of letting himself be ordered about. From then on, Luo Binghe would have an exceptionally badass-looking errand boy and loyal sidekick. But to be clear, according to the original timeline, there are still 500 chapters before it's your turn to debut, Great Master. Who is this distinguished one? Shang Qinghua yells as he rushed forward. Why have you come to this place? Isn't that your boss? Wasn't he the one who ordered you to release those dangerous creatures in Juedi Gorge? No, please go right ahead and keep pretending. Mo Beijun tilted his head. Half of his handsome silhouette sank into the darkness, a chilling sight. With a half-hearted flick of his finger, he flung Shang Qinghua into the air with sudden force. Shang Qinghua crashed into an old tree and fainted, blood spurting unceasingly from his mouth, spurting until Shen Qingqiu couldn't help but sigh with respect. Such effort, such dedication. Bro, you sure do a lot for your career. After paying his respects, he sighed again. He'd known it would go this way. In the end, he would need to step in. Little Bing Bing does not get that memo and immediately jumps in front of Shen Qingqiu. He tries to get him to stand down. He does not. Then Mo Beijun says his iconic line, immortal yet not immortal. Demonic yet not demonic. Interesting. At this point, Shen Qingqiu gets that Mo Beijun is subbing in for the Black Moon Rhinoceros Python, but he isn't going to go down without a fight. He tries to send Luo Binghe away again, but Binghe says, dying for Shizun or dying with Shizun, either one is something this disciple would gladly do. Alright, let the fight begin. So basically, Shen Qingqiu gets his shit rocked. Poor guy. Plus, Mo Beijun is not afraid to add insult to injury, flinging barbs, icicles, and Shen Qingqiu around. Shen Qingqiu genuinely thinks he might die when Mo Beijun catches him by the throat, but don't worry, it's Bing Bing to the rescue. Binghe starts to fight Mo Beijun one-on-one, and Shen Qingqiu is flung into the tree line. He takes a second there to breathe and assess the situation. Luo Binghe's seal hasn't broken yet, so he still has some time. Mo Beijun's intense demonic aura has started drawing other beasts to their location, and there's some disciples laying about dead or unconscious. The Endless Abyss is open and ominous on the other side of the field, and he's pretty much out of spiritual energy. And everything hurts from his go-around with Frosty McGee. Shen Qingqiu decides he's pretty useless in the main fight, so he starts defending the disciples on the ground. Without spiritual energy, he just starts tossing lesser demons with his hands. Out of pettiness, he throws as many as possible towards Shang Qinghua. And then it finally happens. Mo Beijun catches Luo Binghe and forcibly removes the seal on his heritage. There's a huge burst of energy, and Luo Binghe collapses. Mo Beijun sees his job done and just fucks off. Did I mention, the Ice Demon's special abilities include creating portals for fast travel. The system reminds Shen Qingqiu that Binghe absolutely has to go into the abyss. No exceptions, and Shen Qingqiu does his best to ignore it. When he makes it to his student, he wakes him up with the last of his spiritual energy, and pause. Okay, so I know I'm wrecking the momentum, and this is literally the biggest moment, the absolute climax of Volume 1, but fuck, man, this part is so important. It's the first time the system has forced Shen Qingqiu's hand since OOC was released. It's also the moment that pretty much all the misunderstandings for the rest of the story stem from. And there are a lot. Like, it starts getting pretty frustrating how much these two misinterpret each other. And I was really struggling to find how to explain this part of the story. And honestly, my first reaction was just to read it straight from the book. But that'd be like 12 pages of narration. And this is not an audiobook, so I'm just gonna do my best. Let's get back into it.
Misunderstanding 1.
Luo Binghe would do anything for Shen Qingqiu, including, but not limited to, jumping into literal hell if he only said the word. Shen Qingqiu read the book and knows just what terrible, awful suffering waits for him in the abyss. No one would do that willingly, right? If he doesn't want the system to yeet him out of existence, he's gonna have to be scum.
Misunderstanding 2.
Shen Qingqiu kind of starts disassociating and starts saying the scum villain's lines straight from PIDW. Demons are vile and unworthy and all of that. Luo Binghe brings up their conversation right after the Dream Demon event when Binghe asked if all demons are inherently evil, and Shen Qingqiu said no. Shen Qingqiu doesn't remember this conversation at all, so he just doubles down. Oh, you're not just a demon, but a heavenly demon.
Misunderstandings 3 and 4.
Shen Qingqiu stutters, and he can't look Binghe in the eye when he sees the absolute devastation and betrayal on his face. Luo Binghe interprets this as hatred. He goes to kneel and beg for his master's forgiveness, Sheng Qingzhou panics at this because he thinks that letting Luo Binghe's knees hit the ground only means Luo Binghe would remove his knees in vengeance, and he stops him. Binghe thinks he's lost the right even to bow to his master.
Misunderstanding 5.
Sheng Qingzhou slowly walks Luo Binghe towards the edge of the abyss at the point of his sword. They only stop when Binghe is only a breath away from falling. Luo Binghe has already decided to dedicate his entire life to the man in front of him, his beautiful, thoughtful, kind master who protected him from harm, who brought him into his home. That master would never purposely hurt him. Sheng Qingzhou has trained this disciple. He's smarter, stronger, more capable, more renowned than the Luo Binghe in PIDW before entering the abyss. He's sure to move slowly and loudly. The disciple he raised would never be hit by such an obvious attack. And there's one horrible moment when both of them realize how wrong they are. Shuya pierces Luo Binghe right above his heart, and he plummets backwards into the endless abyss. Sheng Qingzhou stays there for who knows how long. The abyss has long since closed by the time the others find him. It's Ming Fan who finds the remains of Luo Binghe's spiritual sword, Zhengyang. It shattered the moment Mo Beijun released his seal, and a shattered sword is normally a telltale sign of a cultivator's death. Ning Yingying bursts into tears on the spot. Yue Qingyuan and Lu Qingge try to comfort him. It doesn't work. The Immortal Alliance conference is finally over, with an enormous death toll, including the first place winner, Luo Binghe. Sheng Qingzhou wins his 10,000 Spirit Stone bet, but he can't bear to look at the award. He passes it to Ming Fan to put away. He just wants to get as far away from Juedi Gorge as possible. But it turns out, being on Qingjing Peak sucks too. His house is suddenly too sad and empty without his roommate. Binghe handles all the cooking and cleaning in the bamboo house. Ming Fan and Ning Yingying volunteer to help him. He sends them away. Behind his house, he clears a spot for a stone tablet. He buries Shen Yang beneath it. He spends a lot of time there. There are rumors that he's like a grieving wife. Who's grieving? Sheng Qingzhou just has a lot to think about is all. Binghe is set to emerge from the abyss in 5 years. Then he'll take over Huanhua Palace and a good amount of the demon world before coming back to burn Kangchong Mountain Sack to the ground and remove all Sheng Qingzhou's limbs. Cool. So you see, Sheng Qingzhou isn't mourning Luo Binghe because he's not dead. This memorial is for the sweet, sticky sheep of a disciple that Sheng Qingzhou ruthlessly pushed into hell for points. Speaking of points, the system interrupts one of his moments kneeling in the backyard to inform him that he's earned 10,000 protagonist satisfaction points at the conference. But due to excessive heartbreak levels, protagonist satisfaction points have been reset to 0.
Please continue to work hard.
Why be sad when you can be fucking furious? Sheng Qingzhou decides to do something he's been putting off for a while. He was pretty distracted at the time, but when Mo Beijun first appeared at the Alliance conference, he heard Shang Qinghua yell something really strange. Also, he needs to vent some anger. He sends Ming Fang to call Shang Qinghua to the bamboo house. Shang Qinghua placed down the porcelain tea bowl and smiled. Shen Shishang's Qingjing Peak is truly elegant and secluded. Even this mere tea bowl is exquisite. Such sophistication truly makes Qinghua feel ashamed. Qingjing Peak and Anding Peak had always minded their respective business. Sheng Qingzhou was reserved and aloof and rarely took the initiative to invite guests, but this time he had actually sent a disciple to Anding Peak with an invitation. Shang Qinghua was unable to discern what he wanted, but no one slaps a smiling face, so he started out with compliments. At least that couldn't be a misstep. Sheng Qingzhou dismisses the disciples, closed the door, and sighed. Shudi, with these words of yours, everything I see begins to bring up old memories. Every plank, every dish in this Qingjing bamboo house was personally arranged by that disciple of mine. Shang Qinghua said nothing but sighed along with him. Luo Shizi was a heroic youth. Such a pity. Those demons brought such disaster upon us. They are truly hateful. The whole world mourns with us. Shen Shishang, my condolences. If Shang Shudi truly felt it was a pity, this tragedy would not have occurred, Shen Qingzhou said faintly. At this, Shang Qinghua stiffened. After a moment, he seamlessly smoothed things over with a smile. What does Shen Shishang mean by that? Is he rebuking our Anding Peak for inadequate administration? If so, Shudi should truly apologize. Shen Qingzhou refilled his teacup. How was it inadequate? You clearly overexerted yourself. You even found demonic creatures like the ghost-head spiders, Nu Yuangchan, and bone eagles, none of which ever enter the human realm of their own volition. How could Shishong rebuke you for inadequacy? Peak Lord Shen, to make such outrageous accusations! Shang Qinghua shot to his feet, his face rapidly changing colors. Shen Qingqiu put his hand on Shang Qinghua's shoulder. Why is Shang Shidi getting so excited? He asked solemnly. Let's sit down and talk. Let me say something. Do you dare respond? Why wouldn't I? I have a clear conscience. Why would I fear a false accusation? With a sneer, Shang Qinghua brushed away his hand. Airplane shooting towards the sky? In that instant, it was like a bolt of lightning from the heavens had struck Shang Qinghua in the head, rendering him unable to speak. After a long time, he managed to stammer out, how do you know my ID? In that moment, it was like Shen Qingqiu had also been burnt to a crisp by the aforementioned bolt of lightning. He'd only wanted to study Shang Qinghua's reaction to the name, to determine if he had also read Proud Immortal Demon Wei. But given his reaction, he wasn't just a reader, was he? After 3 long seconds, Shen Qingqiu jumped on him. It's you! How could I not know your ID after reading the entire fucking novel? If you hadn't let something slip when Mobe Jun appeared, I really never would have known what hole you crawled out of, great master.
Listeners should note, the shout that gave user 001 away to user 002 was WTF.
And with the appearance of another transmigrator, the author himself, we end Chapter 4 and go on to Chapter 5, the last chapter of Volume 1. So, we get some more information about Airplane Bro. He accidentally electrocuted himself and then woke up as a baby in PIDW. He suffered through childhood, then adolescence as an outer disciple, and then finally crawled his way to Peak Lord status, and with Mobe Jun breathing down his neck for most of it. He's been in the fantasy PIDW world way longer than he was in the modern world, so sue him. He has some trouble remembering everything you wrote before. You try writing 10,000 words a day and remembering all of it. He remembers most of the big plot stuff, and he especially remembers Mobe Jun eventually running out of use for a spy and striking him down without hesitation. At least it's a quick death with all his limbs intact. He has a harder time remembering all of the wife plots, the weird artifacts, and the weirder plot device plans that Binghe stumbles across in his adventures. Luckily for Airplane, though, he now has his #1 anti-fan and walking PIDW fan wiki Peerless Cucumber to help him out now. Side note, Airplane Bro definitely still remembers Cucumber Bro, and the many comments he left calling for Shen Qingqiu's castration. Speaking of weird and convenient plot device plants, Shen Qingqiu thinks of one that could help both their situations, and he lists Shang Qinghua to help him find it. Upon seeing the map, Shen Qingqiu slapped the table, then grabbed Shang Qinghua to set off down the mountain. They spent part of the journey eating, part of it playing, traveled partly by sword, partly by carriage. All in all, it should have been quite pleasant. The only part that was a tiny bit unpleasant was that Shang Qinghua moaned and groaned as he sat in the coachman's seat. Why am I the one paying for all the food and lodgings? He asked. Why, whenever we're taking the carriage, I'm also the one driving. Don't you feel any shame? Shen Qingqiu asks from inside the carriage. The funds are communal, provided by Shangmin Qishong. Side note, that means sect leader. He's referring to Yue Qingyuan here. All you're doing is taking them from your waist pouch. Shang Qinghua's heart grew especially sour when he thought back on the words of instruction Yue Qingyuan had given before they left. Shang Shidi, for the journey's duration, Qingqiu will be in your care. He's frail. Please watch over him. What was up with that? As the author, Great Master Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky, who'd put his all into portraying Shang Qinghua's lowly scum, he finally understood this character's pain. Logistics really got no respect. Everyone treated him like a nanny. Who wouldn't understand the original Shang Qinghua's desire to climb the ranks by any means? It was all too sympathetic. They drive through the forest for a while. Shang Qinghua catches on to the fact that they're driving in circles due to the trail of melon seed husks he's been leaving. He also keeps being jump-scared by a creepy, pale, long-haired creature crawling on the forest floor. We'll come back to that one. The moving in circles, though, is courtesy of Huanghua Palace and a nifty maze array. They try asking the system for assistance in breaking the array. Shang Qinghua has a system too. But it's in hibernation mode until the protagonist gets back from hell. Suddenly, there's a bright light and the sound of someone approaching. Out of the woods, it's a young man in cultivator robes, named Gong Yizhao. If you remember, Gong Yizhao is the head disciple of Huanhua Palace, and he took second place in the recent Amor Alliance conference. He's very polite and handsome, and he looks a little similar to Binghe, actually. To avoid too many questions on their motives, and to retain good sect relations, this is Huanhua's territory after all, they decide to let Gong Yizhao accompany them. It also helps that he can let them out of the maze array. Okay, I don't think I've actually talked about what they're looking for. In my defense, they don't explicitly mention it until now either. The Sun Moon Dew mushroom is an extremely powerful, appearing once every 10,000 years magical plant. So of course, it was used in one plot and was never mentioned again. When the seeds are planted with spiritual energy, the mushroom will grow a body to match that spiritual energy. In the case of the planter's death, their soul will zap into the spare body. Some 2-bit villain used it to get pummeled by the protagonist a second time. Shang Qingqiu intends to use it to let Binghe get his revenge, but also keep living as a man with 2 arms and legs. And Shang Qinghua can finally quit his second job, which brings them to Bailu Forest. PIDW only described the mushroom's location as, quote, in a stone cave covered by dense greenery. Extra lucky for them, their new tour guide only knows of one stone cave in the forest, and once they're out of the maze array, it doesn't take them long to reach it. Shang Qingqiu snapped his fingers, and a bright yellow flame sprang to life at his fingertips. With a flick, the flame swam off into the depths of the damp, pitch-dark cave, a bright tail leisurely swishing behind it to illuminate the path before them. At first, the stone path was wide enough for 3 people to walk shoulder to shoulder, but the further in they went, the narrower it became, until they had to turn sideways to get through. It twisted this way and that, like the coiled intestines of some giant beast. The lighting was poor. Even Shang Qingqiu's ball of flame flickered between bright and dim. He flicked out a few more, and the balls of fire chased each other around. Gong Yizhao took up the rear. Shang Qinghua had wanted to wait outside the cave, but Shang Qingqiu had dragged him in. Maybe he was scared or something, because he touched Shang Qingqiu's arm from time to time, making goosebumps run down it whenever he did. Finally, Shang Qingqiu couldn't take it anymore. Because they were with an interloper, he lowered his voice to hiss, "Can you stop pinching me?" There was no reply, but at least the touches stopped. Shang Qingqiu continued to grope his way forward, but Shang Qinghua suddenly kicked him in the calf. Shang Qingqiu couldn't help letting a "fuck" slip from his mouth. Shang Qinghua's voice sounded from far behind. "Shen Qishang, what did you say?" His voice echoed through the winding corridors like it had been stretched by distance. It seemed Shang Qingqiu had been unconsciously walking faster and faster, while Shang Qinghua dawdled, meaning Gong Yizhao, who's taking up the rear, was also unable to pick up the pace. He'd already left the other 2 quite a ways behind. But if Shang Qinghua hadn't been touching him, then who had? Or in other words, what had been touching his arm? Well, I can tell you. It's the same creature that scared them in the forest, a poor, ugly thing with the body of a snake and a humanoid head. Or as Shang Qingqiu said, quote, a bloated face like that of a starved, drowned corpse. The half-snake, half-man had a full head of long, tangled hair, and a patchwork of scales and skin all throughout his body. Shang Qingqiu stopped his companions from attacking it as it hadn't attacked them at all. Just scaring Airplane Bro doesn't count as any real harm. And sure enough, the little guy just slithers past them. They follow the twisty, narrow cave until it opens up into a large cavern. In the center, there's a small island surrounded by a lake of pure morning dew. Above the island, there's an opening, allowing for the sun or moon to shine down. On the island, Shang Qingqiu spots the fleshy bulbs of the Sun Moon Dew mushrooms. Shang Qingqiu wastes no time wading through the pond. He breaks the law of foragers and takes all the bulbs. His logic is that he's really only stealing it from a cannon fodder villain, and it would be good to have some spares in case they fuck up the process. When he's wading back, our sneaky friend jumps out of the water at him. The Dew Lake is absolutely brimming with spiritual energy, so Shang Qingqiu easily punts him back to shore. With some time to actually look at it, Shang Qingqiu deduces that it's probably been living off the Dew Lake, because some of the markings on its skin matches the cave walls. Recalling when they first encountered it in the forest, Shang Qingqiu drove it off with a glare from his sword, and the creature had only been seen in the shadows ever since. He also concludes that he cannot enter the light, including the light surrounding the Sun Moon Dew mushrooms. Without the Sun Moon Dew mushrooms, the lake would slowly lose its energy, The poor guy was probably just defending his home. Plus, Gong Yizhao confirmed that there hadn't been any reports of a snake hybrid creature, and it had clearly been living here for a while. With all that in mind, Shen Qingqiu decides there's no need to kill it, and convinces his companions to leave it in peace. Quote, Gong Yizhao sheathed his sword as he observed Shen Qingqiu looking at the creature on the ground with a benevolent gaze. Gong Yizhao believed that Shen Qingqiu was cut from the same cloth as the masters from Zhaohua Monastery, who believed in mercy and charity. He could have never guessed that Shen Qingqiu's interest in such a creature was equivalent to the average Zhongdian reader's interest in the hundreds of flower-like maidens, each more beautiful than the last. Even after they had left the depths of the cave, no one noticed that the snake man, strenuously struggling on the ground, had stopped writhing, and was instead ever so slightly shivering. Pressed under its deformed body was a tiny sun-moon dew mushroom sprout. In that pair of incongruously bright eyes, a raging fire began to burn. End quote. Uh-oh, that's gonna come back up, won't it? What will become of this? I definitely never read this novel to completion. Wow, I should pick up volume 2. I just need to know how this continues. Okay, all jokes aside, we have made it to the end of volume 1. The Peak Lords say goodbye to Gong Yizhao when they exit the cave. Shen Qingqiu feels a little bad that he'll be replaced as head disciple when Luo Binghe gets back from the abyss, so he gives him an open invite to come study at Qingjing Peak. Gong Yizhao accepts with stars in his eyes, and another is lost to the Shen Qingqiu wife beam, not that he really notices. Shen Qingqiu's busy planning for the future, and namely, the next 5 years waiting, and he feels genuinely hopeful that the mushrooms will save his life. But as the last line in Volume 1 states, quote, he had forgotten the fundamental stupidity of PIDW. If nothing went wrong at such a crucial junction in the novel's storyline, that meant it wasn't exciting enough. Thank you for listening to whatever this is. This is getting too long, but I'll be sure to go through the other 3 volumes of SVSSS. If you're into Danmei, or maybe consumed one of the millions of adaptations of MDZS or TGCF, I don't know, maybe read Scum next. It's really good, I promise. Or if you don't have time to read it between all your other hyperfixations and fanfictions, no worries. I feel you, I see you, and I can tell you literally the whole story. Trust me, I want to do nothing more. See you next time. Okay, so this didn't fit anywhere, so I'm just gonna leave it here. There's quite a lot of MXTX fans who either haven't read Scum Villain or actively dislike it. In some regards, fair. People are entitled to their own opinions. Liking MDZS or TGCF doesn't mean you have to like Scum Villain. Scum Villain leans more into the toxic traits of the genre for sure, but I do have to side-eye some of the anti-SVSSS stuff I see because Hua Chang and Lan Wangji are crazy too. Okay, Luo Binghe is just way more upfront about it. But all of this to say, there's this trend, especially with Chinese fans, to comment under Scum Villain hate with, have fun transmigrating, or say hi to Binghe for me. After all, internet hate is how Shen Yuan scored his gig. Okay, I'm going off script here, and so you know what that means. Nothing's stopping me from spiraling into the depths of character analysis. Shen Yuan turned Shen Qingqiu is one of my favorite POV characters of all time. I always avoid calling him the protagonist because even though the title is technically his in the story of Scum Villain's self-saving system, even he believes the title belongs to Luo Binghe. Gotta respect it. Shen Yuan is such a good pick to transmigrate. He denies it with everything, but he was such a massive fan of PIDW. Sometimes it's fun to consume media that you find objectively bad. It's the reason I rewatch the Twilight Saga at least once a year. Is the romance toxic and predatory? Yeah, of course. Do I have fun rooting for them anyway? Oh, yeah. Even the parts when the story is bad and not that fun. There will be a tiny moment where Bella and friends are trying to decide what movie to watch between Face Punch and Love Spelled Backwards is Love, and isn't that just delightful? Okay, sorry about the tangent. But that's Shen Yuan. He spends hours shitting on every chapter in the comment section, but he's also probably the #1 contributor to the PIDW wiki. He's such a staple in the fandom that the author immediately recognizes his handle. And then there's his obsession with Binghe. Shen Yuan is a certified Binghe stan. He says White Lotus Binghe is his favorite, but even after his blackening arc, Shen Yuan's complaints weren't about Binghe. He was complaining about the world, the artifacts, the magic plants, blah blah blah, that would just fall into his lap. Binghe no longer got to show off his intellect and his problem solving that he showed in the early arcs. He complained about the women, how all of them either needed something from Binghe, like protection or money, that comes from marrying the emperor, or most often his magic cure-all heavenly pillar, or they were just mindlessly attracted to his pretty face. The vast, vast majority of his harem don't really love him because they don't really know him. And worse, Binghe doesn't love them either. He has the biggest harem with the most beauties, but no one who he can really be vulnerable with. Shen Yuan's favorite wife is Lu Mingyan. Like, she's beautiful and talented, and Airplane never wrote a papa scene with her in it. Instead of their relationship being built around sex, it's built on revenge. They have a common enemy. The same guy who pushed him into hell killed her brother. They worked together to bring him down, but that still wasn't love. You might think, oh, it should be Ning Yingyin then. She was there from the beginning, and Binghe found comfort in her before he had any power. But it goes back to the writing. Shen Yuan couldn't support her because of how many problems she causes for Binghe on Qingjing Peak. Enter Shen Yuan. He sets out to be Binghe's support. Before the Abyss, he protects him, trains him, gives him resources to succeed. He read the book, he knows how much potential Binghe has, but he doesn't and shouldn't have to suffer to unlock it. No homo though. Okay, I'm not gonna super dive in on the sexuality aspect because the topic deserves a lot more cohesion and nuance. But I will say, the only homophobia in the entire book comes from Shen Yuan. His repressed modern Chinese sensibilities, despite being able to meet the character he's been completely simping over, his own internalized homophobia keeps him in the closet. The closet only visible from the outside. When the Bingcho stuff becomes more tangible, there are a lot of people against them, but it's not because of gay. Most of them are just also in love with Shen Yuan. Good job, wife beam. The other thing stopping Shen Yuan's relationship development is his stubborn hold on the idea that everyone is a character in a book. This is the most frustrating thing because he doesn't get it. Like, he makes a lot of changes early on that change dynamics between characters. Him becoming close with Lu Qingge is a great example. In PIDW, Lu Qingge and Shen Qingqiu famously hate each other. They weren't meeting up for tea and giving each other rides on their swords. And then there's Binghe. It always comes back to Binghe. Shen Yuan refers to his Binghe as separate from the stallion protagonist's counterpart. But every time he gets close to realizing, it's straight back to, oh, Binghe must be practicing for his wives. Ah! And it gets so much worse in Volume 2. Okay, I really have to stop. This is so long, and I have to edit it. I hope you enjoyed the rambling. If not, give Binghe a pat on the head for me. Okay, bye.